Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, thousands of Rohingya Muslims flee Myanmar in search of a better life. Their escape often takes a deadly turn. What should the international community do to help? Our digital producer, Omar Bazar, is here looking out for all of your live feedback. This is something that's in the news, Omar, so I know people have a lot to say about that.
A lot to say about it, and it was actually pitched to us by so many people in the community. And we also put out a question here on our website, if you take a look. We're asking, how are Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia doing enough to aid the Rohingya people? You can answer that poll by going to stream.aljazeera.com. Here's how one person answered it. Hila Kiao says, not at all. They should address the root cause as ASEAN, that's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, adding, helping refugees is appreciated, but they've been ignoring the root cause. Now, folks at home, you can join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream, and we'll get to those tweets during the show.
And we're always on the lookout for hashtags trending in your part of the world. So here are a few that caught our eye today. Southeast Asia is grappling with a humanitarian crisis on land and at sea. Since early May, more than 3,000 people, Rohingya from Myanmar and economic migrants from Bangladesh, have landed in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Thousands more are believed to be trapped at sea in boats the UN has called floating coffins. After international pressure, regional navies have begun search and rescue operations and agreed to settle the migrants for 1 year. On land, recently discovered mass graves have revealed the routes and practices used by human traffickers who have held desperate migrants, including Rohingya Muslims, captive. Well, the Rohingya have been called one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. The government of Myanmar doesn't recognize the group and says that they are Bangladeshi migrants living illegally. In Rakhine, nearly 150,000 Rohingya are confined to displacement camps along the border and are denied basic human rights. They've been driven from their homes in the region multiple times since 2012. Well, several meetings are expected to address the issue this coming week, but what's the long-term solution for the Rohingya migrant crisis? Well, to discuss that and more, from Cologne, Germany, Zhao Nai is a Rohingya activist in exile. He left Myanmar in 2011 with the help of human traffickers. Hello. And Myanmar, Shui Mong is a member of parliament for Rakhine State and a Rohingya, one of two who have positions in government. From Kuala Lumpur, Charles Santiago is a member of parliament in Malaysia and is chairman of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Parliamentarians for Human Rights. And in Oslo, Matthew Smith, hello, is a founder and executive director of 4 to 5 Rights. That's an NGO that works to prevent human rights violations. He recently returned from Rakhine State. Welcome to the show, everyone. Now, Zhao, let's start with you. What was life like for you in Myanmar before you left?
Well, the Myanmar, for Rohingya, life in Myanmar was never been a better life. We have been always subjected to the many sort of discriminations, especially when we are traveling from one city to another. Always there are some restrictions. I mean, even checkpoints, even in schools. I mean, even when you get very good marks, you are not always allowed to enter to the professional subjects. These are the things, I mean, we have been facing for all the Rohingyas in Myanmar.
So were those restrictions were enough to cause you to flee?
Well, yes, actually, in my particular case, I was once, I mean, subjected to very severe, I mean, treatment. So that makes me, I mean, flee Myanmar and take shelter in Germany.
Could you describe what that severe treatment was?
Yeah, actually, I was, my forefather, my ancestors were born there in Myanmar, and also there we are all in Rohingya Rohingyas, you know. And I have national identity card, which is mentioned clearly that I'm Rohingya and I'm citizen of Burma. At one point, I mean, they confiscated my identity card, and they said I got the identity card, I mean, illegally or by bribing the, I mean, the authorities or something like that. And they put me, I mean, for sometimes detention. And during that detention, there were some very severe treatment on me, I mean.
So you left in 2011 and eventually settled in Germany. Can you tell us what that journey was like? Because of course now in the news we're seeing these awful photos of people fleeing in rickety boats, unseaworthy boats. What was that journey like for you?
So actually, luckily my journey was not that much, I mean, perilous like the current Rohingya boat people. So I got a middleman who arranged my travel from Bangkok to Germany. So by air, so it was a really very safe and no life-threatening things and risk is involved. So even though life was not at risk, I was carrying a tremendous amount of pressure and stress during my that travel until I reached the destination. So I can easily imagine, you know, those boat refugees, what kind of pressure and what kind of stress they have been going through for 40 days, some 2 months. It's very horrible. The situation is.
So we have people weighing in online who are upset with the Myanmar government. You have Filtre here who tweeted in saying ASEAN should at least condemn the actions of the Myanmar government for turning a blind eye to the violence in their country. But Shui, there are some people also who suggest that the government is not just turning a blind eye, but could be in a sense encouraging what is happening. What is your take on this?
Yeah, in our country, especially Rakhine State, the situation is so dire, especially after the violences in 2012. So the Muslim people, they are sent to the outskirts of the city, township. Now all are now put in the IDP camp. So there are approximately 140,000 IDPs in the camps. So IDPs, as you all are aware, there's no freedom of movement. So of course this is a problem with citizenship. But the most important thing for a community, for a person, is freedom of movement. So these IDPs are restricted their movement. Even apart from IDP, in the other area in Mongdo, Bugidong, and the remainder of Rakhine State. So for the Muslim, the Rohingya Muslim, so they are not allowed to go freely. That affects their social economic life, that affects their health, that affects their business. So no freedom of movement means no business, no money, and everything is damaged. So finally people choose, you see, to escape, you see, the place by taking a risky journey to the hope to reach to the Malaysia for a better life.
And of course, you mentioned that risky journey. And then once they get across the seas, Charles, some of them end up in Malaysia. You visited a settlement, a Rohingya settlement in Malaysia. What do the people tell you there about why they came and their journey?
Well, clearly, for the number of people I've met, it is quite clear that they are fleeing violence in the IDP camps. And in this particular case, this young woman I met, she's about 30 years old, could be 35 as well. She had to flee because her house was burnt and her 3 children and her husband were inside the house. The entire village was being burnt. So she had to flee, and the only thing that she could do is grab the neighbor's son who was outside, took along with him and ran to the boats. So by and large, what I hear is that people who are coming here to Malaysia are people who are fleeing violence and persecution in IDP camps or when outside. But going back to the question that they just posed on ASEAN, I think Omar's question on ASEAN, and the question that was posed was, why aren't ASEAN governments criticizing the Myanmar government? Now, ASEAN is governed by a notion called non-interference. Countries don't interfere or do not want to interfere in the political affairs of another nation. It is my view, and the view increasingly in people in Southeast Asia, that this non-interference policy must stop. because what we are doing is we are encouraging persecution of a people. ASEAN talks about a sharing and caring community. It talks about a people-centered ASEAN. Here you have a case whereby the Rohingyas are the most vulnerable community in the region. And therefore, ASEAN governments must come to protect them, must make a comment to protect them, and most importantly, must make actions consistent to sharing and caring to protect the interests and the lives, especially now, of Rohingyas who are leaving the country in big numbers.
So, Malika, we're seeing a lot of examples online of some of the misconceptions and in some cases just flat out prejudice against the Rohingyas. You have Rodney here on Facebook who commented saying that most of them are illegal Bangladeshi immigrants, but Bangladesh refuses to take them back. So it's as much Bangladesh's fault as it is Myanmar's. And then a bit more of sort of a racist take really on the Rohingyas. You have Stuart here who says the Rohingya are not known for their good integration skills. They are known, however, for biting the hand that feeds them. Matthew, I want to bring you into this conversation. How widespread is this type of prejudice from your experience in the country?
Well, sadly, it's very widespread. And I think one of the things that we're starting to realize now is that it's on Myanmar. And we've seen these of different attitudes as well. In there are things.
It looks like we're having a little bit of trouble with Matthew's audio, and so we'll get that fixed. But
on this, let me comment.
Go ahead, please do, Shuai.
Because this is a big problem in our the region. Because Rohingyas are accused as illegal immigrants. This is absolutely not true. Because Bangladesh will always receive if their people. For example, on 21 of May. There was a boat of 208, so it's found that they are from Bangladesh. So I learned Bangladeshi government received them very warmly, no problem. But the thing, the Rohingya who flee from the Rakhine state, when they reach to the coast of Bangladesh, so they push back because they know it very well who are Bangladeshi or who are non-Bangladeshi. So just branding all Muslim in the Rakhine state as illegal immigrants, that is one of the root cause why the people have the problem. The people are suffering, and people are deciding to flee to escape this situation.
And Shuai, I hear what you're saying, and Zhao, I saw you shaking your head when Omar was reading those Facebook comments. You look like you were in disbelief that that's what people are saying. What was going through your head?
The such sort of sarcasm, I will call them, they said Rohingyas and so and so. This is actually coming from the government tactics. Actually, government is allowing, some monks and some religious leader to preach openly hatred against Rohingyas and Muslim minorities. So this is that's why, some of the public, they are having such sort of, negative sentiment against the Rohingya. So I would pinpoint the finger to the government for that reason.
And Charles, speaking of pointing fingers at governments, do you think that your government, the Malaysian government, is doing enough?
No, actually, I want to pinpoint.
Well, this is a question for Charles, but I know that you have thoughts on this as well, Zhao. So we'll hear Charles and then get back to you.
Okay, let me just answer the previous question and then jump into the question that you just posed. I think to be fair to the Bangladeshi migrants, there's been a lot of discussion about what is the source of, what are the reasons why they're leaving Bangladesh. Now, among the many things, one of the critical points is they are being kidnapped. They are being kidnapped by traffickers. I think that is being left out in the equation, and they're sold in Thailand as well as in Malaysia. I just want to share with you that yesterday and today, the Malaysian police located 139 graves in 28 different migrant holdings or traffic holdings in Malaysia. And these people, those who have died, were tortured. They were locked in cages. They were shot. They were beaten up. And, the worst things possible were done to them.
Right.
Now, clearly, this can only take place with government complicity. It does not take place outside the knowledge of government. It happens in the border areas on both sides of Thailand and Malaysia. And in the border areas, you have border patrol guards or border patrol authorities, enforcement authorities. Why wasn't this stopped? I think this is a question that we need to raise. Why was there government complicity in allowing for these traffickers to use the border areas in order to perpetuate their trade? This is trade, by the way. This is trade, and trade that brings lots of money, lots and lots of money. And as a result of the lots of money, lots of government servants, including enforcement authorities, are on the take. So therefore, both both the governments of Myanmar as well as ASEAN governments have really now to launch a massive assault on these human trafficking networks in Southeast Asia, and also look at major revamp of the enforcement authorities that actually allows people to come in and leave the countries.
So we have people online who are also echoing the sense of how difficult the Rohingyas' life is. We have Musa here who tweeted in saying the Rohingyas have been facing systematic and institutionalized discrimination, oppression, and disenfranchisement for decades. Matthew, I know we lost you a second ago. Do you want to expand on that and what the conditions are like for them in the country?
Yeah, sure. Sorry for losing you there. Well, I mean, for the last several years, we've been documenting the abuses against the Rohingya population in Myanmar. And I think the emphasis on root causes that has already come out of this discussion is essential. We're documenting deprivations in humanitarian aid for the displaced Rohingya. So these are avoidable deprivations. People are being denied adequate food, healthcare. In other parts of the country, we're also documenting systematic forced labor. The Myanmar army is forcing men, women, and in some cases children to do all manner of labor for them, particularly in northern Rakhine State. So the abuses are quite serious. They rise to the level of the most serious international crimes that can be committed. And very little has been done. But I think another essential point is that these abuses have been happening for decades, and this is something that I think the international community has really failed to grasp. It would be essential. Mr. Santiago's work is groundbreaking in many ways because it represents a new hope for ASEAN governments to take a different position with respect to this policy of non-interference.
And I hear what you're saying, Matthew. I want to pull up this because this kind of reiterates what you said, that people have turned a blind eye of sorts to this. This is a tweet that's been circulating online. One of the most shared images on Thai Twitter in the past 24 hours. And I scroll down here, and what you see is a depiction of the Rohingyas in a boat. Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, all of them are literally turning away, putting their feet up towards the migrants, telling them that they cannot come in. So, Zhao, when you see images like this, what is your response to the response of regional governments?
Actually, I want to request all the regional government, at least for the time being, we must have two types of, a long-term project and a short-term project to solve this Rohingya problem once and for all. As a short-term project is, whoever are on the boat and came up as refugees, they must provide shelter, food, and Medicare for them as a short-term plan. And for long-term plan, we have to tackle the root cause of this Rohingya exodus from Myanmar. Especially in that case, we have to pressure all international as well as the ASEAN country have to pressure Myanmar government and to come to terms that Myanmar realize their own mistakes and start to correct willingly the situation on the ground.
So we have people who are calling for even much stronger action than that. I'm going to come to you with that, Matthew, in just a moment. We have RJ Fund here who tweeted in saying that what we need is boycott all foreign investment in Myanmar until apartheid-like living conditions for the Rohingya are lifted. And then you have Ahmed Saeed here who says, withdraw ambassadors, suspend ties, freeze assets, halt investment, boycott sanctions, and criminal investigations. Matthew, do you think that is this even on the table at all? Do you think it's likely at all that something like that, a step that drastic, could be taken in the region?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that that conversation is happening is important. Right now, there's very little political appetite, particularly in Western countries, to impose economic sanctions on Myanmar again. There are still some sanctions that are in place. The U.S. government still has some sanctions that remain against the country, but for the most part, most of the sanctions that were in place in previous years have been lifted. But I think the fact that anyone would even be having that conversation now is important. But beyond that, there are a lot of companies that are investing in Myanmar now. It's being touted as the last great frontier for a number of different industries. A lot of businesses around the world want to believe the very romantic, rosy rhetoric about democratic change in the country. And so the realities that the Rohingya are facing, those realities are very inconvenient for some in the international community. And so I think a wake-up call is certainly needed with respect to that whole climate.
Inconvenient realities. Charles, what do you have to say to that?
I'd just like to go back again to a issue that was raised by Zonine. I think
Yes.
Zo's point has been taught again, though. One is the governments of Indonesia and Malaysia have accepted or agreed to accept the boat people into their territories. This decision was made, I think, 2 or 3 days ago. And I know the Indonesian boats are in the search and rescue mode, including the Malaysian naval ships.
Have they managed to rescue any?
Search and rescue operations have already started.
Right.
But my only problem is I have not heard so far any of these boats coming into our territories. That means they have secured the boats, the boat people, and brought them to shore. I've not heard that. And I raised that because I'm just wondering what has happened to these 4,000 people who are supposed to be floating around the Andaman Seas, and what has happened? Because I know that they were all over the place, and suddenly they were going from from Thailand to Malaysia, Malaysia to Indonesia, and back to Thailand again, and so on and so forth. But suddenly now they've all gone missing. So I'm just curious whether they all have, these boats have capsized, or they have gone missing, or what has happened to them. Otherwise, our naval forces, the navies, would have brought them into our territory.
Well, you asked an excellent question. So, Shui, I'm going to go to you. Do you know what's happened to the thousands who are drifting really in the Andaman Sea?
But when I look at these people, because I can clearly see, when I see the picture of the woman, the way they dress, the kids, so they are from Myanmar. But also, I'm not denying they are not from Bangladesh. But we should have said, especially in this boat that now we are watching now. So I can say that they are from Myanmar. So we have to find the root cause. But since these are all pushed back by the whole country and they are adrift in the sea, so that is something like a violation of international law. So first they should be given proper shelter. Then, so the ASEAN leaders must be able to adopt a sustainable solution so that in the future we don't have such kind of.
So you're hearing from Shui Meng now, a member of parliament who's talking about the root causes. The question that is left outstanding, though, is where are those thousands of migrants who are floating in the Andaman Sea, drifting? Charles Santiago asked that question. We'll try to get an answer in our post show. Unfortunately, we have to pause the show now. Our post show will continue at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, on the next show, drilling for oil in the Arctic? Shell? No. That's what activists are telling the Shell Oil Company. We'll talk to people on both sides of that debate, and we'll see you online. Welcome back. We're in the post show. We're discussing the Rohingya migrant crisis in the Southeast Asia region. Let's get right back to that conversation. Now, Charles, you posed an excellent question right before we headed into the post show. Shui gave one answer, but our question to you is, shouldn't the Malaysian government have an answer to that? And are you working to push the government to give you an answer about whether or not they've rescued anyone in the search and rescue that they've announced?
Well, we are pressuring our government to ensure that maximum protection is accorded to the boat people. But my suspicion is, and this is actually confirmed even by UNHCR, that some of them are close to the Myanmar territorial waters, and they actually want to return back to Myanmar, but they are unable to do it because the traffickers are demanding money before they can be sent back to Sittwe or wherever else where they come from. So this appears to me something that the Burmese government has to address, meaning the Burmese Navy has to go out and bring these people back inside the country. And of course, when they have already crossed the territorial waters of Burma, then countries like Malaysia and Indonesia have to go and bring back these people. My only question is, I'm just not sure where these people are. And I think that's something that, the international community has to answer.
Well, Charles, you mentioned that the Myanmar government might be en route to bringing them back, but Zhao, that raises the question that these are people fleeing from what they say is oppression and persecution. What would happen if they return to Myanmar?
Well, if they return to Myanmar, their situation will be much more worse than previous situations. And also, I won't believe that Myanmar government will try to lend their helping hand to save these people, because they have been doing this sort of discrimination, which these days people even terms as a slow genocide to Rohingyas for many years. So I don't think so Myanmar will help them.
So we actually have somebody from our community who's kind of like breaking with the idea that the Myanmar government has been completely negligent towards this. You have NR who tweeted in saying, kindly note Myanmar's government's decision yesterday to address some of the root causes of the Rohingya issue. Goes on to say, what ASEAN has done over the last couple of days that has applied political pressure that actually seems to be working and having an effect. Shui, do you see any progress on the government side beyond what is symbolic? Sounds like Shui is not there. Matthew, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, we're not seeing progress. We were in Rakhine State recently, traveling there often, speaking with Rohingya often. The population right now is no closer to getting citizenship status, and this is one of the core root causes of what's happening. So the statelessness issue is not being addressed. Further to Mr. Santiago's point about the boats that are offshore, we can confirm, Fortify Rights can confirm, I can confirm personally that this is happening. There are boats offshore. There are people who are out there in the clutches of criminal syndicates, and they are trying to extort money from the families that are onshore to return the Rohingya back to Rakhine State. We know the Navy has been involved in working with human trafficking syndicates, in some cases towing boats out to sea. I think yesterday, when the Myanmar Navy went and quote unquote rescued a boat, this is what you would expect from a responsible government. We do have very serious concerns about what will come of the Rohingya who were brought into custody by the Myanmar Navy. This is an institution that has a history of abuse. So there are a lot of very big questions there that remain to be answered.
Well, Matthew, I have one based on what you've said. How do you know that the government is complicit, really, with the traffickers?
Well, I mean, this comes from eyewitness testimony, people who experienced firsthand. So this is going back over the last couple of years. We've been documenting how the Myanmar Navy has towed boats that are operated by criminal syndicates, assisted, in other words, guided them out to international waters. They know that these boats are carrying Rohingya. They know that they're operated by armed gangs, essentially. And there's also some financial complicity as well. The Myanmar authorities have also been earning money. I mean, the human trafficking of Rohingya and Bangladeshi is over the last 2 years has generated more than $250 million in the region. And the authorities in Thailand, particularly in the authorities in Myanmar, have been in on that economy of abuse. But most of our information comes directly from survivors and eyewitnesses, and we're conducting some ongoing investigations regionally as well.
So Shui, you heard Matthew there talk about investigations that Fortify has done that shows complicity between the Myanmar government and smugglers, human traffickers. Shui, what do you have to say to that, of course, as a member of the government? Looks like we might have just lost Shui, so we'll pose that question to him as soon as we get him back on the phone. And of course, there was a blackout in Naypyidaw where Shui is, so we will return to that. But before we do community.
Sure, we actually have a question here from Takhalus who says, why is Aung San Suu Kyi not saying anything? Now, for those who don't know, she's a very, very significant human rights icon in the country and a member of the opposition. Zhao, do you have any sense of why she's been silent on this?
Oh, well, actually, I was a very strong supporter of hers during 1988 student demonstration and during 1990 her election, her party election, you know. At that time, I still remember one of her favorite quote. She said, I mean, use your liberty to promote ours. But these days, after looking at her being so silent on this Rohingya issue, I took that quote as a joke. Actually, she has been pretending to the world as if she cares about the human rights. Actually, she doesn't.
Well, Shui, I'd like you to pick up on that, just because I know that we have you back on the phone now. We lost you just a moment ago, but I'd like you to pick up on what Zhao just said about Aung San Suu Kyi, of course, the opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, but also on the point that Matthew raised about the Myanmar government being complicit in working with smugglers and human traffickers. So generally, what is the government doing, and what do you think they should be doing?
Maliki, I can't hear you. I think something wrong with the connection.
That's okay, Shui. I'll try again. What do you think the Myanmar government should be doing in regards to the Rohingya? It looks like there's an echo, so we will try to get that fixed. Charles, I'll push that over to you.
I think the quick answer to your question is, one, the Myanmar government has to give citizenship rights to the Rohingya community. That will solve a lot of problems. But going back to the question of Aung San Suu Kyi, I think a lot of people are wondering why and unable to explain her silence on this important issue. And in fact, I think the pressure was mounting on her that a few days ago, the NLD came out with a statement of compassion and support for the people, the boat people. I'm not sure if they actually used the word Rohingya, but the point is, they said, you know, all efforts must be made to protect the interests of the boat people. But I think people are really upset and let down by Aung San Suu Kyi because when she was in prison, the entire global community worked for her release, promoted her interests, promoted reforms and she was the icon. But today, she's not standing up for the rights of Rohingya. And I think partly because this is an election year, and any support for the Rohingyas from her would actually mean her political party, and she'll be doomed. But I think this is where human rights advocates have to stand up and be counted, because lives are being lost in the seas, and therefore you do not want that. And you have to stand up and say, Rohingyas are citizens of Myanmar. Their rights and the rights of others are one and the same, and their rights have to be protected.
So Zhao, I'll go to you with this last question because we have to wrap up, but I'm interested in hearing what you think a long-term solution to this, because in the short term, we have certain governments saying that they will resettle Rohingya for about a year, but long-term, what would you like to see happen?
Long-term solution is, as Charles mentioned a few minutes ago, the citizenship rights. all the Rohingyas should have citizenship rights, and that citizenship rights should be coming willingly from the government, not like you just give them a citizenship card and again you start putting a lot of hindrance and persecution and blockade on these people. That won't work. So Rohingya, to solve this once and for all, Rohingya needs citizenship, and it should be coming willingly from the government side and as well as from the public side. Then it will solve once and for all.
Thank you, Zhao. You're hearing from Zhao Nai. Earlier, we heard from Shui Mong, Charles Santiago, and Matthew Smith. And before we go on to the topic for tomorrow's show, we'll get one last word from community. Omar.
We have somebody whose handle is moral humanity, appealing to basically everyone says of humanity, saying ASEAN, Burma, or Myanmar, and China should take responsibility for the Rohingya. What does it mean to be human? Hashtags helping, cooperating, and integrating.
You heard it from Twitter. Now, on the next show, drilling for oil in the Arctic? Shell? No. That's what activists are telling the Shell Oil Company. We'll talk to people on both sides of that debate, but until then, we'll see you online.